Hello, this is Mark Wilson with Function Point. Thank you very much for checking out our webinar recording. This is actually a re-recording of a webinar that we did last week, which was Invoicing Part 2. Unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties in the audio recording on that webinar, which is causing me to need to recreate a new version of that so that everyone will be able to check out the recording and get the benefits of reviewing that content. So this recording is a reproduction of the webinar that is, again, Invoicing Part 2. So if you haven't seen the webinar recording or were not able to attend the Invoicing Part 1 webinar, I do recommend checking that out. You should find that on the YouTube channel and in on the website on the previous webinar recordings list under resources. But if you have checked it out, or even if you haven't, you still should be able to follow along in this webinar, which is really focused on batch invoicing. So we're going to be looking at two different circumstances, two overall different types of circumstances that batch invoicing might be necessary and how it can assist you. Those two different types of batches are going to be multi-job batch invoices, where you're creating a single invoice for multiple jobs to a single client. And we're also going to be reviewing batch invoicing across multiple clients, where the purpose of the batch invoice is really to be more efficient and to save time in the creation of those invoices. We're going to be looking at different types of invoices for each of those batch types. So fixed price we'll review first. We'll then take a look at retainers and recurring billing in the concept of a single client multi-recurring job scenario. We'll also look at time and materials jobs, where you want to include multiple time and materials jobs on a single invoice to a single client. And then we'll take a look at a combination where you might not have circumstances that are so easily labeled, and you may need to be combining multiple different types of invoices, time and materials or recurring or fixed price, all onto a single invoice. We'll take a look at how to do that. And then afterwards, we will then move on to batch invoicing across multiple clients, which again is really around creating efficiencies and cutting the time it takes for you to accomplish your billing. Most of the time applicable for recurring billing retainer scenarios and also time and materials. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the actual content. So the first example that we're going to be looking at it's going to be pretty simple. It's a batch invoice for a single client for a fixed price project. Now in this example, I actually have a project that I've created where there are multiple jobs underneath the project. So the project is for my client North Shore Auto Group, and it's a video production project. It includes multiple videos. It's called the North Shore Auto Group Summer Blowout Video Campaign, and I have 4 jobs on the go for that project. There's 3 30-second TV spots, and then a job used for the media placement for those spots that we'll be producing for the client. So in this scenario, pretty straightforward. We're going to be charging the client 50% of our budgeted amount for these videos, not including the purchasing and the placement of the media. In this case, I have $15,000 as my estimated value for each of these videos, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bill 50% of the grand total of that $45,000. So the way that I'm going to do that is from the project's details page up at the top right, I'm going to select to add new and select invoice. So I'm invoicing from the project's details page to include multiple jobs. When I do so, it's going to bring me to the add invoice page with some information that's specific to the batch. For example, notice that we have a checkbox or a radio button giving us the option to create a single multi-job invoice, which is what we want to do in this case. We're creating a single invoice with multiple jobs to a single client. The invoice name will fill in with the name of the project. I can maybe drop a date on there or some other information if I want to, maybe 50% down, something like that. And then choose our contact at our client. And this is important as it will then control the name that shows up on the PDF, as well as the ability to send them the invoice through the system. The billing percentage in this example is going to be 50%. So I'm billing 50% of the 3 30-second TV spots. I'm going to leave tax groups off for now, just to keep the math simple. I usually do that in demos and webinars and things like that, as taxes are so different across different regions. But of course, you'd want to select your tax group if it's applicable in this case. Select that invoice. And this next page can usually be skipped. It'll show you the description that's come from the project. You can update that or delete it or modify it, whatever you want. You can include some payment notes on your invoice if you want to, but for the most part, you can generally just select next and add jobs to invoice. And then this is where you get to the actual list of jobs that you want to put on the invoice. Now, sometimes it might be all of them. And notice that there's a button that says add all, but a lot of cases it probably isn't. And in this case, it isn't. I have my 3 30-second TV spots. I want to invoice each of them for 50%. Now, I put in 50% when I got to the first invoice page. So when I click the plus icon here, this is going to add this job to the invoice for 50% of the estimated value. $15,000 the estimated value, 50% of that is $7,500. I can go ahead and select to add the second one and the third one, and I now have an invoice that equals 50% of my total budgeted amount for those three TV spots. Now, if I want to modify or make any adjustments, and this will become very important in some of the other examples that we look at that aren't this simple, there is an edit button here that gives you full 100% control over the invoice. This is essentially the invoice creation page for a single invoice. You just have access to all of them on this one page. So once you're satisfied with this, in this case it's just 50%, I'll select Finish Adding to Invoice, and I now have a single invoice. So I'm looking at invoice B142, it's a batch 142, and I can see the jobs that are on this invoice. I'm invoicing each for $7,500, the grand total equals $22,500, and I can produce my client-facing PDF. So there's my invoice. I can go ahead and save that and send it to the client, or I can select Notify Client and have it sent to them via the system. So that's a pretty simple example. And when I say simple, I just mean that it's very predictable. We have an estimated value, and we're invoicing 50% of that estimated value. It's pretty easy. Later on, we're going to use this job again as an example of a hybrid where we need to bill the remaining 50% for this job, and then also some media that we've purchased with relation to purchasing the media for the TV spot. But before we do that, we're going to look at a recurring example where we have a recurring billing model for one client with multiple jobs, and we want to invoice them every month for the value of a recurring bill. This is also pretty straightforward, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. It should be pretty easy. All we're going to do is we're going to look at another project I've created to show an example of this. And this is something I'm seeing more and more these days with the agencies that I'm speaking with, is a common scenario like this that's coming up quite a bit. In this scenario, in this example, I basically have 3 recurring billing jobs for my client. I have a social media management retainer, I have a search engine optimization retainer, and I have a web maintenance retainer. So we manage their social media account, we do SEO, and we also do any kind of maintenance work on their website. And for each of these jobs, I've created an estimated value that represents the amount that I bill them each month. I bill them $2,000 for social media management, $1,500 for SEO, and $1,000 for maintenance on their website. This is the total value of the invoice they get each and every month. So invoicing that, very simple. All I need to do, just like before, is select to add new invoice from the project, choose my contact as we did before, and I'm going to choose my billing percentage or leave my billing percentage as blank, which defaults it to be 100%. It's very easy. All I need to do is click Add Invoice, select Next, and from here, I'm just going to select Add All because I want all of these jobs in the invoice. Select Add All, and then choose Finish Adding to Invoice. That's our batch invoice created for our recurring jobs. We can see the jobs themselves, and then the invoice amount that we're billing, which in this case is just 100% of the estimate. So that's pretty straightforward if you have that type of scenario occurring. A lot of agencies I speak with also have multiple retainers where they just have one retainer ongoing for a client for a month, but they have a whole bunch of those for a bunch of different clients. So we'll take a look at that example in this video as well in just a bit. But the next thing that I want to touch on is the other billing type for a single client, which is going to be a time and materials multi-job batch. So in this scenario, and this used to be a bit more common than it is now. I find this is kind of the traditional way of charging clients, and I know a lot of agencies still charge this way. Some some have less cases like this, but really the situation is we have a whole bunch of jobs for which we are going to bill our client for 100% of the value of the time and the expenses incurred in the previous month. So come June 1st, I'm going to bill them for all of the unbilled time and expenses that have occurred between that day and the previous most recently created invoice. And that will equal the total value of all of our unbilled time and expenses, which equals the value that we want to bill our client. Much more common historically for agencies to be billing a lot of their work like this. I find in this day and age, a lot of agencies are moving to more of a fixed price or recurring billing models, just based on the requirements from their clients. But in this example, we're going to pull up a list of jobs, and we're going to do that job find based on category. So this is something that I mentioned in the previous webinar as being very important, and that is making sure that you choose your category dropdown. The category is an item that you select when you're opening up a job, and it typically represents how you intend to bill for something. What is your intention for how to charge your client for this piece of work? And it's a really important field to select when you're going to be doing batch invoicing later, because it allows us to do something like this. I can say, I want to see all of my time and materials jobs for a specific client. So I'm going to choose a client, Great Atlantic Insurance. And then I'm going to, so I've narrowed it down to the category of time materials, specific client of Great Atlantic Insurance. And then I'm going to select Find Active. Now, selecting Find Active is going to pull up a list of all of the jobs that have some sort of status that is considered open. And your statuses might be custom to your own circumstance, but they're either considered open or closed by the system. That's why it's really, really important to be maintaining job status accuracy, closing down jobs when they're done, updating statuses where applicable. It's very important to keep on top of that, so that when you do a Find Active, the list that you get is accurate and up to date. Now, in this case, we have 6 jobs that we are going to be billing our client for that are time materials. And I can see some information here that allows me to know which jobs I'll be billing and what to bill them for. Now, these values will fill in automatically, but get an idea for what we're seeing here. So we can see that we have an estimated value, an actual value, the variance between those numbers, previously invoiced amount, and our difference here between the value that we've previously invoiced and the value of our actuals. There's actually one job here that I'm looking at that I want to take off our list because it's not really the best example. It's one that I was kind of playing around with earlier, but there's another one that I'm going to keep on to show what would happen if you don't have unbilled time and expenses, but I want to get rid of the other example. So let me just do that. I'm just going to refresh my view here. And that's now gone. But let's take a look. So the value that we have on the far right is the difference between our invoiced amount previously and the value that we've done so far. Now, in case where you see a negative, that's letting us know that there's a value that needs to be billed. If you see a positive, which is unlikely, you'll more likely see a 0. That's letting you know that you don't have anything that needs to be invoiced for. And you don't need to memorize that, but it'll show it to you here, and we'll see it. The system will help us to identify that on the next page. But what I'm going to do is, from this job list, up at the top right, I'm going to select to add invoice. So I'm invoicing from a job list as opposed to the project because I'm invoicing for jobs that might be across multiple projects or might not have any projects at all. And then in the batching selection, I need to make sure that I choose single multi-job invoice because I'm only intending on creating one invoice. I might call it, Great Atlantic Insurance, May 2017 invoice or bill. Choose my contact on my client. I'm then going to choose to calculate from actuals because I'm wanting to bill for my actual time and expenses. I'm going to leave the billing percentage blank because I want 100% of everything. I'm going to take the tax group off to keep the math simple. Select add invoice. Just like before, I can update descriptions on this page if I want to. Select next. And I then have a list of all the jobs. Now, this is where you need to kind of pay a little bit more attention than the other cases where it's just a fixed price or a predetermined recurring amount. In this case, we're billing based on time and expenses that are unbilled. And the way that you can see that is just by going down the list and hovering over these little plus icons. When I hover over this plus icon, it tells me that I have 4 uninvoiced timesheets. So I'd select that, and it adds the invoice. On to the next one, I can see that I have 0 uninvoiced timesheets or expenses. So I would leave this off the batch. Next one, there's 44 uninvoiced timesheets, so we'll bill it. We then have our fall signage, 18 uninvoiced timesheets, so we'll bill it. And then lastly, the corporate website, we have 22 uninvoiced timesheets, so we'll choose to bill it. Every time you click the plus icon, it's adding the job to the invoice. However, if you want to make any adjustments or you want to know, what were those 22 timesheets, you can of course select any of these and open it up and see exactly what's occurred. So in this job's actually quite service heavy. There's a lot of line items here, but we'll see that we have 2 values, production and coordination. They each have timesheets. And we can look and see, what those timesheets were, who entered them, their description of when was entered, and choose to make any adjustments. Whether we don't want to bill for it or we want to bill a different value, we can make any adjustments to any of these jobs that we want to. Once we're ready, select Finish Adding to Invoice. And I now have my invoice created. I can see the jobs, and I can produce my client-facing version. So this is going to have all the different jobs. It's just one page there. All the different jobs, and then their descriptions if you want one, of course, and then the value that you're invoicing for those jobs. Now, you can also include a report as well that outlines all the timesheets and expenses that you're billing for, if that's the type of detail you'd want to provide to your client. So having the category selected, again, is very important so that you can do a job find for time and materials if it's a way that you bill, and it's going to seriously save you some time if you can batch that. But another common scenario is where we have sort of like a combination of a fixed price and also some sort of time materials or perhaps expenses on top. And that could be across multiple jobs for different projects. So you may initiate that invoice by doing a job find, or it could all be related to a single project. We're going to jump back to the project example that we were looking at earlier, the summer blowout video campaign. We're going to use this as our example. And the example that we're going to use is we're going to actually add in some expenses here. So I have some expenses for our media. So we're just going to go ahead and add those in. So we'll just leave this. In fact, maybe we'll adjust this a little bit. Actually, we'll just leave it. We'll, of course, have the description so that we know what this is for. Save that. And then let's go ahead and just add the other expense as well. So we've added both expenses. I was thinking about making the value of the expense differ from the estimated amount, but we'll keep it really simple. We'll just say that the amount that we intended to purchase for the media was the exact amount we ended up purchasing. So now when we look at this project, what we'll see here is that we have values in our actuals column here. And typically we'd also have values in our actual columns for the actual spots because people will have tracked their time for that. But in this example, in this case, let's say that we are now ready to bill for the second half of this work, which means that we need to bill for the full value of expenses that we've incurred on the job. So the actuals, not the estimated, but the actuals. And then we need to bill the remaining 50% of all of the TV spot jobs. So it's a combination of fixed price and time materials all in one batch. The way that we would do that is select Add New Invoice up at the top right for the project or from the job list. We have our single multi-job invoice, choose our contact, and we're now going to enter 50% of our estimated value because that is the more common of the combination. I have 4 jobs I'm billing for. 3 of them are 50% of estimate. 1 of them is based on actuals. So we're going to put it as 50% of the estimate, add the invoice, update descriptions if we want to. And then from here, for these 4 jobs, I'm going to choose to add all. And that's going to put in 50% of my estimate for each of these jobs. However, the media placement job, I don't want 50% of my estimate. I want based on actuals. So I'm going to choose to edit this. I'm going to clear out the column. So clicking on the invoice word will clear out the column. And I'm just going to click on the actuals column. That's going to automatically fill in. And of course we want 100%, so not 50, but we'll put in 100%, select actuals, and that'll fill in the value of our actuals. And we can then look and see, what is it that we're billing? What's the description? So you'll see that's the description I entered a minute ago, the quantity and the rate and markup and so forth. And we can make any adjustments to this or just choose to bill it. Select Save and Close. We've now altered the value of our invoice. Alter the value of the job on the invoice to reflect the actuals. Select Finish Adding to Invoice. And we now have our invoice created. So we have our 3 jobs at 50% and our 1 job based on actuals. So it's really just about kind of staying on top of each of the job lines on the invoice and knowing why you intend to bill it and what you intend to bill it for. Any kind of ambiguity there is not really going to help. So you typically want to make sure that you are estimating things correctly, labeling things correctly, and that especially if you have, let's say, account executives opening up jobs and they are not the ones that will be doing the billing. Maybe a bookkeeper is going to be doing the billing later on. It's really important that you provide, some context. You provide some descriptions, perhaps in the job description or in the date description from the list view, just somewhere that lets the bookkeeper know, hey, this is how this job is going to work. This is how we intend to bill for it. This is our plan for what we intend to bill and why we intend to bill it and when we intend to bill it, so that the person who's creating the invoicing has a solid understanding of what's intended. And can go ahead and create the invoice accordingly. And if you have things set up correctly, like if you've put in your estimated values, if you've put in your actuals, and you have a good description of what to invoice and why, then the whole process can be very, very quick. And especially once you get the hang of it, this batch invoicing stuff, you can really fly through it pretty quickly. Although you usually want to give it a couple months, of doing invoice cycles before you're really, really going really fast, just to make sure that you're catching everything and that you get into the hang of it the right way. But I digress. We've taken a look. Let's just take a look at our agenda here and catch up to where we are. So we've covered these items here. We did our fixed price and our recurring. We did our time materials from the list view. We also just did that combination of time materials and a fixed price. Next, we're going to look at batch invoicing across multiple clients. And the first thing we're going to look at is the recurring billing type of work, where we have, let's say, our retainer examples. So in this scenario, I have a bunch of jobs that I have labeled as retainers. They're really just recurring billing. You're billing the job for a predetermined amount that is entered into the system, and you're going to bill them every single month for that predetermined amount. And you have a bunch of jobs that meet that criteria. You want to be able to bill them all at the same time, send the invoices to the respective clients, and then, of course, go on about your day. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a job find, and we're going to use the all-important category field to make sure that we are choosing the right billing type, so retainer. And all I'm going to do from there is just select Find Active. I'm not going to narrow it down by client or anything else, just retainer and Find Active. I then get a list of all of my retainer jobs that I have on the go. Each of these jobs has an estimated value that equals the amount that we intend to bill each month. I have a bunch of kind of standard SEO and SMM retainers, and then I have a big retainer here for our client Safeway that's a creative services retainer. It's for $10,000 a month. It's a larger account, and we do a lot of different types of work for that account, but it all rolls up into that $10,000. What we then do from here is up at the top, we're going to select Add Invoice. Now, when I select Add Invoice, you're going to notice that a lot of the options we've been seeing on the previous examples are not here. One of those is create a single invoice batch with multiple jobs on it. We can't do that because the list of jobs we were just looking at came from multiple clients. So you wouldn't have one invoice with multiple jobs from multiple clients. Each client is going to want their own stuff on their own invoice. So we're going to be batching multiple individual invoices as far as the creation of them, but they won't be connected in a batch themselves. We're just batching it in the way that we're actually generating the invoices. Also, the name doesn't fill in, it's blank. Typically what you'd want to do is give it a name of what it is and when it is. So what it is your retainer billing, and when it is in this case April 2017. I'm then going to choose my billing percentage, which is 100%, therefore I leave it blank, and leave it as estimated, and select Add Batch Invoice. Update descriptions if I want to. We then have a list of all of our jobs. Again, these are jobs for different clients, and in this simple example, we're billing 100% of estimate. So all I need to do is select Add All, and it's going to generate all those invoices. But that being said, you may need to make adjustments, even though this should be a scenario where you're not really making many adjustments very often. But if you do, of course, you have the ability to open up and edit that invoice in any way that you see fit. Select Finish Adding to Batch, and that is our invoices created, because multiple invoices have been created in this example. Now we are looking at one invoice in the batch, but we can select the batch to see a list of all of them. So these are all the invoices that we've created. We can then choose to post the invoices as far as syncing them with QuickBooks. We can also choose to notify selected as far as sending them to our clients. So any jobs here where there's a contact selected, you'll be able to notify. And clicking Notify Selected will send an email to the client contact with the PDF, a link to the portal if you should choose to do so, and if that's a feature that you're using. And they will then receive the invoice with the PDF or the PDF invoice through the system email. And you can, one thing I should mention as well, you can choose which printout they're getting, so you have control over that as well. So that's a way that you can, if you set things up correctly and you think about when you're opening up your jobs, am I setting this up to assist me with my billing workflow? Is this conducive to an efficient invoicing experience? And if you have a scenario where you have a lot of jobs that are billed for the same amount each month, then having those jobs in the system as the category of retainer or recurring with an estimated value that equals the amount you intend to bill will allow you to significantly improve your efficiency and the time it takes for you to generate these invoices. The next example that we're going to look at is similar, but a little bit different. It's going to be time and materials jobs across multiple clients. Now this is probably a little bit less common, but if you have a lot of jobs that you're just billing every single month for the value incurred in the previous month, then all we would do is choose our category of time and materials, select Find Active, and I have a list of all the jobs that are active time and materials jobs. They're across multiple clients. So just like before, when I select Add Invoice, the only option I'll have here is just to give it a name. So I'd call it, time and materials, April 2017. Choose to calculate from actuals. So that's going to choose to add up all of your unbilled time and expenses. Billing percentage is blank, and select Add Batch Invoice. We can then update the description, select Next, and we then have our list. Now, this is typically a little bit more tedious. You have to spend a bit more time on it because it's not as predictable. It's not as predetermined as the fixed price jobs. The value that you intend to bill here is based on your actuals, and I find that agencies that have this type of scenario are often needing to make minor adjustments here and there, adjusting the value of this timesheet or choosing to not bill that timesheet or that expense, whatever it may be. So what we'll do is just hover over the plus icon. Where we see cases of anything unbilled, we'll select it. So there's 2 uninvoiced timesheets for this job, so we select it. For the next job, we have 37 uninvoiced timesheets, so I'd select that. And as you go down the list, we'll find some that probably don't have any. Here's a perfect example. So Branson Financial website, there's no uninvoiced timesheets or expenses, so we skip it. And we go to the next one uninvoiced timesheet. So we're just going ahead and adding in any case where there is unbilled time or expenses. We'll add a couple more here. So there's a bunch with 0. There's one with 18 timesheets. We'll add that in. Here's one with 79. Add that in. I think that should be it. This last one might have a couple as well. Yep, 1 uninvoiced timesheet for that job. So you'll notice how we have a bunch that we've added and a bunch that we haven't. Select Finish, and we've now generated 10 odd invoices. It might be a bit less. So we've generated 7 invoices for different clients, and we can then choose to notify selected, and that'll send out an email to each of those clients with their respective invoices and the PDF and all the detail that they need for those. We can then jump back to our job list and see cases where where you see zeros is generally what we just invoiced, and so might be some overages and jobs that are under budget as well, just depending on if we build things for discounted amounts on expenses or timesheets. But this column here really gives you a clear understanding of how does our invoiced amount differ from our actual amount. And then from here, if any of these jobs need to be closed, we can select Editable List View and go ahead and close those jobs down. But that is, really the gist of the batch invoicing. I mean, I think that a lot of this is just about experiencing it and just learning a little bit from doing it. And I find that when you first get into the batch invoicing routines, for the first couple months, it's just important that you're really keeping on top of things. You're really looking at what it is that you're doing and making sure that that you're making any adjustments you need to make, and that you're handling the general organization of these jobs in an effective way. So you're putting in estimated amounts, you're updating statuses where appropriate, you're making sure that the time goes in before you do your time materials invoice, and then when you're doing the batch that you're taking a look at each job on the list. Once you've done it for a few billing cycles, it becomes, you'll get a lot more comfortable with it, and you'll become a lot faster as well. I've seen some really great success stories of agencies taking their monthly billing routines down from 10 hours down to 20 minutes. So it can be quite effective, and I do recommend investigating your your billing routines potentially being done in batches. So that concludes the kind of the rehash of our invoicing webinar that we're re-recording today. of course, this is a little bit different than other webinar recordings in that there were no questions because it is a re-record. So please, if you do have any questions, if you need to get in touch about anything, please you can email the success team here at success@functionpoint.com. Again, that's success@functionpoint.com. And just let us know if you have any questions or issues around invoicing in any way that we can help out. So we'll be happy to provide some options for different ways that you can get the answers that you're looking for, or the assistance that you need. So again, thank you everyone for your time today. We do have our webinars going on a cycle right now of every Wednesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern time. So please do check them out. You can register for them by going up into your system, hovering over the little information button, and selecting the webinars button. That's going to bring you right to the page on the website where you can see a list of the previous webinars, and then also see the schedule for the new webinars coming up. So please do check that out, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Take care. Bye now.